Hi guys, Samantha from Jessima Tutorials here, and today I'm going to show you how to make this. And now we're going to be creating earrings, but you can also create a keychain as shown here. So you can see how that looks. And there's quite a few different little elements in here. There are some mica frills, there's a liquid clay net, there's some druzy on the back, there is a polymer clay bezel, and we're going to be working with some UV resin. So let's get started. So what you're going to need to start is to create that liquid clay net. So what you're going to need is a tile, a few of them, small ceramic tiles that can fit into your oven easily, and this is what we're going to work on. So I've got this one, and just make sure that it's clean. And then you're going to want some translucent liquid clay. Let me just bring you forward a little bit. There. And now I've tested this technique and I've found that Sculpey, let's see, let me show you that brand. Here we are. Liquid Sculpey translucent is the best brand for this. The other ones don't really work all that well. I'm going to show you a way to make a net without using the technique that I'm about to show you, but if you want to do the technique that I'm about to show you, use this brand. This one works the best and it really is the only one that works very well. So you're going to take that, and we want a fairly large net, so you can spray a bit out, and then you want to spread this as thin as you can get it without it having holes in it. So I want to be able to cut out two from this, so I'm going to spread it nice and thin, and it doesn't need to be strong, so you don't need to worry about it being too thin, and get rid of any little bits that might be in there. And I think I might want to add just a touch more liquid clay around those edges. Spread it out a bit more. Okay, and now if you don't have this brand of liquid clay, don't worry, I'm going to show you something after this that you can use to create a liquid clay net if you don't want to use this technique. So just spread it all out like so, so it's nice and thin. The thinner the better, and then twist it around just to make sure you don't have any gaps. That's quite important. And then just make sure you don't have any little bits or pieces, like I've got a little hair there I want to get out, and that's all. Okay, next step is to grab some water in a spray bottle. Any water will work, just make sure it's in a nice spray bottle. I have it in one of my old isopropyl alcohol ink bottles, and I'm going to spray from the top, and you want to get this in like as few sprays as possible. So I'm going spraying from this end, and then I'm going to spray again on this end. Okay, and let's see, am I happy with that? Maybe one more. Okay, and now I'm trying to see, I'm not sure if you can see this, but here, let me see if I can bring that up to the camera. You're trying to look for little bubbles like over there. I'm not sure if you can see that. Hopefully the camera can pick that up. There, hopefully you can pick up there. But you're looking for indentations in the liquid clay. If you can't see that, you need to spray again. And close up works pretty well. Now I'm going to make two versions of this because sometimes it doesn't work, but we use up so little liquid clay that it really doesn't matter too much. I'm just getting around the edges, making sure that I did get it. Okay, so hopefully you can see we have a whole bunch of little bubbles on there. Hopefully you can see that. And then you would pop that in the oven for about half an hour to an hour at this brand of liquid clay's recommended temperature. Now I'm going to make two of them just in case the one doesn't work or doesn't have enough for me to cut out enough. So make another one of those, and then I will show you how to do it without the water. Okay, so those are in the oven. Now you're going to hear the oven ticking in the background. I do apologize for that, but we need to get them in the oven as quick as possible. Now the next step is going to require a texture stamp. So you're going to want one where it has raised spots as a pattern, and then kind of indentations that all link together. So hopefully I explained that right. You don't want a reverse of this where all of the spots are the indentations and then you have veins as the top. You want it so that if you peel this off, all of the pieces are going to be connected. So here are two examples of that. I wonder if you can see that there. So this is our second step. So I'm going to make two here. So I'm going to just spread a bit of liquid clay over there, and I think I want it over here. I want to spread this liquid clay over here. And now this is not going to create as delicate a net, but it will work if you don't have that brand of liquid clay. Because that brand of liquid clay is the only one that really works with the water. Okay, then what you want to do is you just want to kind of spread that out into the veins, like so. So hopefully you can see there now that it's highlighted what I'm going for. You want the liquid clay in the veins all connected, and then you want it to kind of have holes on the raised bit of the pattern. And I'm using a credit card, or not, just a card, just to scrape off liquid clay from the surface so that we have nice clean holes, like so. So that's that one, and you would just bake that. And that texture stamp is actually on my Etsy store, Jessima Design, so if you're interested in it, I'll leave a link to it. And yes, you can bake those textures. They're perfectly bakeable. Okay, and this one I am making sure to scrape away any surface liquid clay. And this one you can also bake because it's made out of rubber. Okay, and I'm going to bake that also for an hour with our other liquid clay, and then once they're baked for an hour, allow them to cool, and then we can see what they look like when they're done. Okay, and so while those are baking, we want to create some bezels. We're going to be creating the black border around here. So for that, you're going to need some black polymer clay. Now I've rolled out a sheet of black here. And I'm just going to grab a piece of plain printing paper because I want to smooth it out. And just use your fingers to just gently smooth over the surface, and this is just going to get rid of fingerprints and things like that, and it'll also stick it firmly down onto your tile. Okay. And I'm just going to lift this up because I want to do the other side as well. And we are going to put the other side on a piece, onto a tile that I can remove from my work surface. Place that down. We are again going to smooth. And just make sure you get all of those little bubbles and raised areas. You want it to have a smooth surface. Like so. Okay, and now it's stuck down onto your tile, which is another thing that you want. Now you want cutters, and so I'm going to be using my pebble cutters, and these are the number 2s, and I am using a large and extra large, as you can see here, and I'll show you why in a minute. So we're going to take out the large, and these are the earring ones, so they are reverse. There we are. Okay, so let me move this out the way. I'm going to take each of these and find the one that fits inside them, and then just gently press down so that they fit together, and they'll almost snap a little bit together, and this way we are going to be creating nice even borders. Okay, so I'll start with this one. Bring this over here and keep them together when you're doing this, and lay them down where you think would be a good place to put them. And this is why I'm telling you the sizes. I'm using a large and an extra large, and they fit together just right. Okay, then I put them down. Give them a nice firm press, and make sure to press that cutter that is in the middle as well. And my clay has been rolled out on my thickest setting, which is about 2 millimeters thick. And then I'm just going to turn around and I'm going to do this one too. And I'm doing that before I take this out because I can get a little bit of distortion if I cut them separately. Whereas this is keeping the clay in place while I press the next one. Alright. Now we want to be very gentle when we're doing this. You want to lift straight up. And you can see that's stuck in the cutter. Sometimes it does do that, so you want to be very careful. There we go. And if it lifts out like that, don't worry. Just press it gently back into place. And you can actually use this cutter to help you with that. Just bring the cutter back in and press. Make sure you're not cutting anything out. And that will press it back into place. And then just smooth. Like so. Because we're going to have a few cracks. It's a very easy process, so if it does get stuck in the cutter, that's not a big deal. We'll just have to fix that up in a minute. I'm just showing you what to do with this one now quickly. Okay, we've got that into the right spot. And then we're going to take this and lift that out. Bring this back over. And just be careful because we don't want to cut out anything that should not be cut out. And then press on it again to give a nice clean cut. And that one's sitting right as well. And then just give it a really good smooth because you're going to want to do that. Okay. And then I'm going to lift this up. And that should leave us with a border. And now you would repeat with the other side. It would be better if the other side hadn't lifted, but you've got to realize that is going to happen. If it does, just repeat on a different tile. Okay, and then you're going to have these little bits and pieces around the edges because the inside cutter never cuts as well as the outside cutter just because you can't give it the same pressure. Don't worry about those little bits and pieces. They can stay. They're not joined to our bezel. They're separate, so when we pick this up they will come off. Okay, I'm just making that the outside edge is also clean. Then just go with your finger and give it a nice smooth down. Okay, and I'm just going to bring over something to clean up the edges as well. I find that these little rubber tools work really well. They help smooth out any little bits and pieces that might be a problem. So just run it along the edge and it will get rid of any little bits and pieces so that the sanding, if there is any, is very minimal. And this is why having it on a separate tile is also nice because now you can pick it up and make sure you're getting everything. Like so. Okay, all smooth. Then you want to do the inside area as well. And don't press too hard, you just need to gently brush along the edge. If you're pressing too hard, you're going to be distorting your bezel. And we're going to be doing an open back bezel, and I'm going to be showing you how to do that. So don't worry about putting a back on this. If you want to, you can put a back, but it's going to result in a different effect later. The tutorial requires an open back bezel. Okay, and there we go. Then just give it a final run over with your finger to get rid of any fingerprints that might be there. And then you would bake that for a full hour at Premo's recommended temperature. And I'm going to be baking a few of them. I'm going to bake this one and I'm going to bake the opposite side as well. And you just get rid of the inside section like that, but you're going to have to repeat it. And I'm also going to be making some for keychains as well. So I'll make some of those and then when we're done we can start sanding. Okay, so everything is out of the oven. So I'm just letting the liquid clay cool for a moment, and these ones I'm just going to lift off the tiles. So just grab a blade, excuse me, and lift them up like so. And you can see that we have these little wispy bits around the edge. Those should come off easily with just a gentle pull. Like so. And now we are going to need to sand these backs, but we can take care of that in a minute. And now some of them might be a little bit persistent. I find that it's easier to just gently trim them off using a blade instead of using sandpaper. It's just so wispy that the blade just cuts right through them. You don't even need to try that hard. And just repeat that with all of them. And also do on the inside, because you want to just make sure that these edges are really nice and clean. The cleaner they are, the better your image is going to look at the end. Okay, and I'm just making sure that I got everything. Right. And then you would repeat that with these ones. Okay. Then as for the liquid clay, here are the ones on the tiles. Now I want to show you one where we sprayed too much water. That was what I did in the beginning. So I think I can get that angled. Here we are. You can see that the water has repelled the liquid clay, and that's a good thing, but sometimes if you put too much water on, you're going to create islands of liquid clay rather than islands of water. So this is not what you're looking for. You're looking for something more like this, where you've got lots and lots of little dimples in the surface. So I'm just going to lift this up so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, and you can see that they're just little islands that aren't really sticking together, and those aren't really of much use in the technique that in the project that we're using today. But I think the centerpiece over here is a little bit more together. So here, this is more what you're looking for. So just give me a moment to lift that up. Okay. And these bits are a bit too wispy, so I'm just going to pull that off. But this centerpiece here, as you can see, it's got a few holes. That's what you're looking for. Okay, I'm just checking that out. Okay. So I'll put that back over there, and we'll take this one off now. And you want to be careful, because it's very, very thin. And on top of that, it has holes in it. So it's a very thin piece to work with. So you want to be very careful when working with it. And if you've baked it properly, this is why I bake it for an hour at its recommended temperature instead of half an hour. We want it to be fairly strong when we take it off, because otherwise you can encounter issues. Now just lifted the edges first, and that means that I can generally just pull it off in one piece, which is what you're looking for. You can see it, this one has holes in it. And don't worry about bubbles as well, those ones, that's cool. We're looking for that. So hopefully there you can see. Okay, so that's that liquid clay. And so I've got those two off to the side, and I find that putting them on a piece of paper helps them from sticking to things. Okay, then I've got these. Now you might encounter some cracking with these, so it can be a little tricky with them. So let's see if I can get this out. Actually, it might just be better to roll. Yeah, there we go. There we go. And you're not going to get all of it, some of it's going to crack, but you should end up with something somewhat like that. And now the holes are not going to be completely clean, but they'll be clean enough for you to use. And so you've got something interesting there. So that's that one. And just, you would spend some more time cleaning out all of these liquid clay bits. They'll come out quite easily. And let's do the same with this one. Take that, and I'm going to roll it. wish it came out with something nice and clean. That one actually came out better. I like this design better. And you can see there are some liquid clay bits, but for the most part it's fine. And now this is still a little delicate, so you want to be careful with it. And if you can, put it back in the oven for a little while. But again, it's something else that you can use. And it actually would create a really interesting bracelet if you did something interesting with that. But anyway, if you don't have the right liquid clay, you can always do that to create interesting little nets. Okay, so I'm just going to go and tidy all of these up, and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, so the next step after having trimmed those bezels is to colour our liquid clay. So I'm just going to pop that down, like so. And you can't see it right now, but that's fine. And then I want you to get an alcohol ink dabber, and this one I'm going to be doing in blues and greens. And I'm going to be using this, and it's already used pad, but that's okay because it's got the same colours as what I want to use. I'm going to be using Rainforest Green, Baja Blue, and Sapphire Blue. So I'm just going to open those away from my project because they drop flecks and you don't want that on your piece, so open them far away because they drop a lot. Alright, then just spread it out like so. And you can do whatever colours you want. And I'm just going to be spreading this over the surface. And make sure you get everywhere. Okay. Then this part is optional, but I'm going to be taking some 99% isopropyl alcohol, and I'm just going to give it a light spray. And what that's going to do is just going to break up the ink a little bit. But that's completely optional. Okay, then what I like to do is I just like to take a heat gun. Again, this is optional if you don't like waiting for things to dry. And I'm just going to heat it. There we go, that's all that's needed. I'm just going to lift up this one corner. Just still being very careful because this is very fragile. There we go. And now hopefully you can see all of those holes. Let me just clean this up for you. Now you can see what that looks like. Quite a few little holes in there. So that's what we are aiming for. So that's that one, and I'm going to colour this one the same. So I'll do that very quickly. I'm just going to lay that out. I want to try and get it flat. But keep in mind you can colour it any colour you want. Completely up to you. Okay, and then I've decided I'm going to be using this one instead of the other one. And so we want to decide which side we want to colour. I want to colour the side that's been in the stamp. And this time I'm going to be using Passion Purple instead of the Rainforest Green. And so I'm going to bring over a pad that has those colours. Swap it out. And the reason for I'm just reusing ones, but the reason you don't want to be just using any random one is because when you put alcohol ink on a pad that already has alcohol ink on it, it brings that old alcohol ink back to life, and so those colours will rub off. So if you say use blue alcohol ink on a pad that already had red alcohol ink, you would get red alcohol ink. on your project. And you might want that, but I don't. Okay, just dabbing that around, making sure I get a good cover. Press quite hard so that you get a good coat of ink. Okay, give it a light spray, and again I will just lightly bake it. Okay, and we're all done. So I'm just going to bring these across on pieces of paper so you can see what they look like. So they look really interesting, like that. And here's what it looks like on the other side. Okay, and then these ones, this is what it looks like. Now I just want to point out something important. If you're using the liquid clay that has been in a stamp, what you want to do is when the liquid clay comes out of the stamp, there is the part that's been sitting inside the stamp and the part that's been sitting on top of the stamp. So if I was to put this back in the stamp, this is how it would have been laying before I took it out of the stamp. So you have the top and then you have the bottom. You want to put the ink on the bottom because the top part over here, sometimes if you don't scrape away all of the liquid clay, you're not going to be capturing the pattern as well as if you would on the other side. So when you stamp ink on it, make sure you're getting the bottom that's been resting in the stamp, because otherwise you might not get as good an image. Like this one, you can see a lot of the holes were filled up with ink, and that will get covered up with the ink if you're stamping on that side, rather than if you're stamping on this side, you're not going to get those holes. So just wanted to point that out. Okay, so now we are ready to move on to the next step. So you're going to need your borders for this, and I'm going to start with my little earrings that need to match. And I'm going to bring this ink to piece across, and I want you to stick this down onto your tile and try to get it without any air bubbles or wrinkles, things like that. Okay, and then I want you to position this over so that you can see what part you're going to be getting, and you want to choose the best spot. Okay, and I'm quite happy with that. Then just press down fairly firmly so it sticks somewhat. And let's see, where did I put it? Here we go. Grab a pen. And just gently, and I'm using black pen, which is good because we've got a black piece of clay here. Whereas if it was white, I'll probably use pencil so that I can rub it out. But the pen's okay because we're not really going to be able to see it on the clay if I get any on. And we're just going to trace around so that we can cut this liquid clay out. And I'm going to lift that up. Okay, I'll just move these out of the way. Cover up the pen again. Lift that up. And then the first step is to trim between the two. Just cut that line and then just trim away the rest, and I'm going to pop this large piece to the side because it'll be more clumsy to work with. Okay, and now depending on how good you are, you can either use scissors to cut them out or you can use a craft knife. I'm choosing to use a craft knife because it's not nearly as fiddly. Grab your clay, stick it down onto your ceramic tile so that it's stuck properly, and it should cut out pretty easily with a craft knife. You might need to coax it along a little bit, but it should do okay. And you want to be cutting inside the line. And I'm just going to carry on doing that all the way around, and I will repeat with the other one, and then I'm going to show you how to do it with the stamped ones as well. There you go. So it's pretty easy as long as you've got it stuck down pretty well. Now it doesn't have to be perfect either, because you don't want a completely perfect edge due to the fact that you want it slightly rippled. There. Okay, get rid of that. That can be used somewhere else. And then just make sure that you get rid of everything. Don't want any little bits left over. Alright, and then you will repeat with the other one. Okay, and before we do anything though, just stick this down and make sure that it's sitting alright. And if I see that there are any edges that are showing, I'll use my clay to just gently hold the clay, liquid clay down. Well, I trim away that excess. Okay. And then repeat with the other ones. Okay. Get rid of that. And we'll bring over this one now. Stick that one down as well. And again, choose the area that you like. Gonna grab this. And actually, it might actually be easier with this one since it's a little bit chunkier. Might be easier to just trim it with the blade. You don't have to use the pen if it's not too difficult for you to do it with your blade by just holding your bezel down. And you should start to get a nice clean cut. Okay. And then I will trim that one out like so. The trick is to keep your bezel held down. Okay, just quickly clean up that tile. Okay, and so now next what you want to do is just lay this down again. And you can leave it this way if you want, but it's basically sitting just along the edges. So what I would like to do next is just make it smaller, and I'm going to be using a cutter to do that. I'm going to position this cutter right in the middle here. Press down, and I'll trim out that. And then that means that it'll be sitting right inside the bezel. So depending on what you want, if you want it to be sitting at the back of your pendant, or if you want to have it sitting inside the pendant, you're going to need a different strategy. So if you want it sitting inside the pendant, use the cutter that was used to create the inside of your bezel to trim it out. If you want it just sitting along the outside of your bezel, then just use the actual bezel itself. So that's two ways that you could do it. But I would like them to be sitting inside. And that does not have to be perfect, just trim away. Like so. There we go. Okay. And now it will sit basically inside of my bezel, which is what I would like. Okay, and I'll repeat with all of the other ones. Okay, so here are our pieces so far. This is what they're going to look like. So that should fit comfortably inside there. Oops. This one's a little thinner, so it's a little bit stickier and difficult to deal with. But here is what that one will look like as well, and I have this trimmed out too. Bring you forward so you can see that. Okay, there we are. So that is what we've got so far. So the next step is going to be to create some little mica frills to go inside our bezels when we start using resin. So let me move these aside. Gotta be careful with them. They're so fragile. There. Okay, so next step is going to be using a mica shift. So I'm going to be using this reef bed stamp of mine. I'll provide a link to it, but you just can use any stamp you want. So roll out a bit of silver clay on your thickest setting. Okay. Then I'm just going to spray this with a bit of water. And this too. There we go. And I'm just going to press this in. And I like the mica shift that this creates. But you can use anything you want. But it's not the image so much as the little frills that we're going to shave off the surface. So it's not really a mica shift, it's the excess from a mica shift that we're looking for. Okay. There we go. You can see how that came out. Put this off to the side. Grab something to just dry up our tile. And then you also want to just dry off your clay because you want it to stick to your tile when you are shaving. It just makes life a lot easier. So make sure you get that properly dry. Okay, and all we're going to do is we're just going to take this and we're going to shave. And this is what we want to keep. So pop that onto a piece of plain printing paper off to the side, and that will prevent it from sticking to things. And you just want to shave off little pieces like so. And now this is one way of doing it. You can use a stamp. I want to show you how to create your own little impressions in a second, as soon as I've got one or two more off of here. And it uses up so little clay as well, which is nice. Okay, so that's probably enough from that. Now I want to show you how to create your own one. And now this is a bit more time consuming, but I prefer the result, to be honest. You want to take a skewer and just start stamping and go straight through the clay. And you can see it takes a little while, but personally I prefer this because it gives very, very fine mica frills. But if you have a stamp that will work for you, by all means use that. And so I'm just going to continue stamping until I have enough to shave off some mica frills. There we are. Then just trim away the excess. And then shave. And you really want to be careful when you're doing this, because you just want that surface level piece. You want a whole bunch of holes to still be shining through. And I think that piece might be a bit big, so if it is a bit big, what I do is I just like to gently rip away pieces like so. And I'll keep all of those, and it gives me a more jagged, ripped edge, which looks more like little seaweed strands to me. Okay, and now each of these pieces, unless you don't like one, if you don't like one, just pop it back into your clay. All of the ones that I like, I am going to put in the oven for half an hour at Premo's recommended temperature to bake. So we want to bake them so that we can pop them into our bezels. And you don't want really big pieces like that, so just rip them. And you can see it creates a completely different sort of effect than the stamp. It's a much more random, organic look. Okay, so I'm going to go pop those in the oven, and then when they're done we can start assembling. Okay, and now I want to move on to the very last step. Well, that is in the oven. We want to give our bezels a very quick sand. So just grab some sanding papers. I've got polishing papers here, and it's the back that you really want to pay attention to. And just take it and gently give it a sand. So we want to get rid of that shine. It actually might be easier to do it like this. And now don't worry, because we're going to be putting resin on the back. You don't have to worry about sanding it perfectly. I probably sand it up to about 1200 grit, whereas usually I sand up to an 8000. But you don't really need to sand it all that high. You just need to get rid of that shininess on the back. So in my case I would sand up to the blue cloth. So it goes green, grey, and then blue. So I'll just show you what that looks like in a second. Okay, and the blue one. And then the front does not really need to be sanded because we're going to coat that in resin. And if you have little bumples on the back, like with this one, don't worry because we are going to be covering that up. It's not going to be making too much of a difference. Then grab some isopropyl alcohol. It doesn't have to be any particular strength. You just want to have some to clean up your back, sides and front, because some clays have a little bit of oil on them, and I find that that can inhibit the resin, and so it can cause a little bit of issues. So I generally like to clean, especially in this case where it's really resin heavy project. Just give it a nice quick wipe. And that should dry off really nice and easy. Okay, here we go. And that's all I want to do with the bezel, so I'll do that with the other three, and then by the time I'm done with that, the pieces should be out of the oven and we'll be ready to go. Okay, so they're in the oven, and so we can move on to our earrings now. So here are our first two, and our second two. So for all of these, what you want to do is you want to get some packing tape, like this. Just gonna quickly find that end. There we go. Okay, just bear with me for a moment. Okay, and you will take them, stick them on, and make sure you get a good press down so that it's stuck there. And repeat with all of them. Make sure they're well stuck. Okay, and we're not going to keep them all joined together on this big strand. I'm going to cut them off so they're all individual, which is the best idea because you can mess them up otherwise. There we go. Put that tape away. And then I find that the best thing to do then, just so that you're not getting sticky fingers or this accidentally attaching to anything, I find that it's best to just kind of remove as much of that tape as you can. Like so. And I would repeat with the others as well. I'm just going to put them over here for the moment because we're going to be working with this one to start with. Get rid of this little excess bit on here. Okay, then I find that also it's a good idea to just go along with your fingers and smooth in the back, just to make sure that it is well stuck. And then we're ready to go. So first thing I like to do is I like to create a little backing. So what I've done with this one is I've mixed some druzy with resin, and that is what I want to do here. So I'm going to take a little bit of druzy, get that open, that's silver druzy, and I'm going to be using Lisa Pavelka's Magic Gloss today, but you can also use this Chinese resin, that will also work if you want. Basically any UV resin will work. You can also use two-part resins like ice resin, but they will take a lot longer because you have to wait 24 hours between each layer. Or at least 12 hours between each layer. Okay, so I'm just going to pour a little bit. We do not want to fill this up. Okay. And then I'm just going to use a skewer to attach this to all the edges, and you want to put it in resin first and then we can attach the druzy, because we want to scrape it all the way along to the edges so that we get rid of any bubbles, so that we avoid creating bubbles actually. And a little bit of bubbles is not a problem, but we really don't want bubbles around about by our edges. That's just not something that we want. Alright, there we go. Then take your druzy, and I just like to pop a little bit into my hand, like so. And I want to just sprinkle it around. Like so. And this is optional, you can add whatever you want into your bezel. And if you've got a lot of layers, I suggest maybe making your polymer clay a little bit thicker, so maybe instead of 2mm thick you could make it 4, depending on how much stuff you want to put inside your bezel. I don't want to put too much in, I'm going to be using about 4 coats in total, so I don't need too much thickness to my bezel. But if you wanted to add a whole bunch you could. Okay, now I'm just going to gently press these around, move them in so that we have a nice even distribution of these druzy flakes. And now I know it's tempting to turn this over and see what it looks like. The best you can do is lift it right up and have a look underneath, but don't be tempted to do anything else other than that because you will tip this out. Okay, and I'm pretty happy with that. And so just check along the edges, make sure you don't have anything along the edges. And then I'm going to pop that into the UV lamp, and that will just stay in there for about 5 minutes, just so that it's a little bit hard, and then we'll move on to the next layer. So I'll just pop on my UV lamp. And the UV lamp is basically a nail lamp where you just cure your nail polish. Okay, and I'm going to also do the same with this one. I'm going to just cut away the tape. Okay, and with this one I'm going to skip the druzy and I'm just going to move straight onto the liquid clay so that I can show you the difference between the two. Okay, so I'm putting a fair amount of liquid clay on there again. Oh, not liquid clay, resin. And just scrape along because you're going to get some of these bubbles on the surface of the tape. And now I'm creating 2 pairs of earrings, so make each earring pair the same. So this one has no druzy, so the opposite side of this is going to have no druzy as well, but the other one, the opposite side of the one that I showed you before, will have druzy, so you want to just make sure you keep them the same. And I don't really worry too much about these bubbles. If you do worry about the bubbles, you can take a butane torch, run it over. I also find that a heat gun works very well, especially if you're working a bezel like this. If you're not working on a bezel, you can send the resin flying, but it works pretty well here. Pop your heat gun on your hottest setting and lowest wind speed. There you go. Hopefully you saw that those popped, and it works pretty well. Okay, now I'm going to take the liquid clay that belongs here, and I'm going to just place that down. Okay, and just get it to squirt up through those holes. And if you get spilling along the top here, don't worry about that because we are going to coat the entire thing in resin on our last layer. So don't worry about it. And just press down on this so that it gets a nice even coat of resin over it. You want it to sit nice and flat. So just coax the resin to kind of flow over it. And if you see any bubbles, also try and get those worked out as well. And then I'll take the heat gun one more time. Okay. And that should help. And it also will make the resin a little bit more flowy. It creates it, makes it a lot runnier, which is nice. If you're working in a cold environment, which I am, so heat it with a heat gun, it can also just make it easier to work with. Okay, and I'm just going to hit it one more time to get rid of a few more air bubbles. Okay, and that one will go in our UV light. Okay, and by now this one should be just about ready to go for our next layer. So next layer, grab your resin, a nice even layer, and now that amount of time that I put in the UV light for is enough to cure the resin somewhat, but it is not enough for you to just say that it is completely done. So if that was your final step, you want to leave it in there for about half an hour. That's what I am comfortable with, to say that it is properly cured. What I'm doing now is I'm just getting it cured enough that it will sit still while I am working on the next layer, but it is by no means properly cured. So I just wanted to make that apparent. And I'm just dragging it to all edges, making sure we've covered everything. Okay. And then I'll bring over our liquid clay. This is so fiddly. Hold on, I've got it all stuck together. There. Okay, I'm going to drop that in. And then just poke at it to get that resin to flow over the top, and then you can reposition it. And again, yes, you're going to get resin coming over the top and onto the sides here. That's perfectly fine. Just fuss with it until you've got a layer of resin coming over the top. And it's okay if it wrinkles up and kind of has different, it doesn't need to lie flat. I actually prefer if it doesn't, because then it looks interesting, really interesting. So I prefer to have it kind of a ripply effect. Okay, and I'm pretty happy with that. Just check over, make sure that everything looks good. And then that will also go in the UV light. Okay, and I'm going to go and repeat with our other ones. Okay, so I'm just going to bring these out of the oven, well not oven, out of the UV lamp. Here's how they look so far, and I've got the other ones in as well. And you can see that that resin is still soft. But it's hard enough for us to move on to the next step. So I am now going to take these little mica frills, and now you have two sides. You have the one where you pressed in, and you have the other metallic side, which I personally prefer. So just have a look at both sides, see which one you like the best. Okay, and just remember to move. And actually, I shouldn't be putting these on just yet. I should put resin on first. And this doesn't use too much resin, but it is mostly a resin project. So I will admit you do need a bit of resin for this. Okay, and just spread that out to all the edges. I'm starting to create a really beautiful layered effect. And because the liquid clay here is translucent, you can see the shine of the druzy through the liquid clay as well, which is a really nice aspect. Okay, and I'm just going to place these down, and you can move them around a bit once you've placed them down as well, but it's best to know which pieces you want inside before you put it into the resin. Okay, and then I'm just going to press that down. And then just go with the resin and just kind of get it to coat so that it sticks in there instead of floating too much. You can let it float if you want, but I want it to be covered pretty well in that resin. And then the next step will basically just be to finish off the front, and then we need one more step for the back. Okay, and then just position this around as you would like it to sit. And then I'm going to pop that back in the UV light. And with this one we're basically going to do the same, but I'm going to be using these. Okay, I'm quite happy with those. And I'm also going to be using these cute little micro balls. Take that out. Pour in some more resin. And so it's basically a very simple process. You're just popping in resin, putting in whatever elements you want, and then filling it up again. And now you might be wondering why I'm not putting all of the elements in all at once. The reason for that is if you put them on different levels of layers of resin, you're going to get a multi-dimensional effect, whereas if you put them all in on the one layer of resin, it's going to look more one-dimensional. Okay. Put those in. Just going to press them down so that that resin pulls up through those holes. And they can float a little bit, but I don't want it to float too much. Okay, then I'm just going to take these little micro bead balls, things, whatever you call them. I'm just going to grab a few and I'll put a little bit on the edge here. I don't want too many. And you could position them wherever you want. You could include whatever you wanted in here as well. Another thing you could think about including is cogs. Cogs would look really interesting. Shells, coral, that sort of a thing would also look really interesting. So play around with it. But I do want them to kind of be settled in a little clump together on one side. Don't want them spreading all over the place. Okay. Tip those back in there, and that can go back into the UV lamp. Okay, and here is how it looks. So now we're just about ready to finish up. But the last thing we want to do is we want to peel this tape off the back. Now you want to be very careful when you do this because the resin might not be completely cured on the back. If it isn't, is it cured enough? Looks like it is. If it's cured enough, we can peel the tape off. And we want to set the back. So it's still a little bit runny. But it's enough for us to peel that off. And then you want to pop that into the UV lamp as well, so that your back gets cured. Okay, and let's check this one. Front's cured enough. The back should also be pretty well cured as well. Let's check that. Okay, and it's still got a few runny areas, but we can cure that quickly by popping that into the UV light. Okay, and then after their backs are smooth to the touch, so you don't have any fingerprints coming off, then we can move on to the fronts. Now the fronts might have dulled a little bit, like this one. The front wasn't quite cured completely when I flipped it over to cure the back, but that's fine, don't worry about that. That doesn't actually make any difference. But what we want to do now is we want to move it onto a resin mat. So here's the resin mat. And this means that if we have any spills, it's not going to cause too many problems. Though we don't want to encourage spills, so just try not to pour too much resin. And this is the final coat for the top, and then I want to do a coat for the back too. So I'll just pour a little bit. I don't want to start with too much. And you can see there, that spot where it was cloudy will clear right up as soon as you put the resin on. Okay, and I want you to drag it out to the edges, because we want that entire surface to be covered. And now I don't think I put enough resin on, but when we just drag it to the edges like this, we want to be working with only a little bit of resin, because otherwise you can encounter spills. Best to start with a little bit and then work your way up from there if you get pulled away. Okay, and we might not even need to add more resin, we'll see. Just go and add it again to all of those edges, and then if you see any areas where it's pulling away, then you're going to need to add more resin. So let me just leave that for just one moment. I think I might want to add just a touch more resin, just like 1-2 drops, and that will just encourage it to not pull away from the sides. And now instead of using a heat gun, if I have a bubble, I will first try to pop it, and if I can't, then I'll scoop it out. Okay, just making sure that's covering all the sides. Scoop out any bubbles, and then I'm going to pop that into the UV light. And I am basically going to repeat the exact same thing for this one. I'm going to put another final top coat over the top of this like I did before, and I'll repeat with the other 3 earrings. And then when those are finished curing, for about half an hour, we will come over to the back and we will do the same thing, and I'll show you how to do that. But you want to cure these once you've got the top coat over them for about half an hour. No shorter than that. You can go longer if you want, but just keep in mind that if you leave these in the UV lamp for a long time, like 3 to 5 hours, if you happen to do that, the alcohol ink will start to fade a little bit, because if it's exposed to direct UV light, it will fade a bit. Okay, so I've been in the UV lamp for about half an hour, so I'll just bring them out. I love how they've turned out, they look really nice. Okay, now the backs are going to be a little sticky, and this can either be because the resin's not completely cured, but most of the time it's going to be because the residue from the tape has been left over, so don't worry if it's sticking a little bit. Now the important thing is to just make sure that this is properly cured. Yeah, okay. And I'm just going to turn that over, see if it gets any marks, and if it doesn't, then we're ready to move on to the next step. Next step is going to be to use our resin mat, and we're just going to turn these the other way around. Now instead of using the magic gloss, I'm going to be using the Chinese resin, and the reason for that mainly is because the magic gloss creates a dome. I really just need something to paint over the surface. I don't really need a dome. Just going to take this, open it up. You can use the magic gloss on the back if you want, but I don't think it's really necessary. Okay, and I'm going to put a fair amount on there. And then this paintbrush I use exclusively for resin. It's a little hard because some of it has cured, but it works. I'm just going to brush this around. Now I want a pretty good coat. If you're struggling to get it to these edges, then put some more resin on. But everything should clear up nicely with this coat. And I will repeat with all of the others, and this I will leave in the UV light for half an hour as well to make sure that it is completely cured. Okay, and just make sure you've got a good coat. I need to put on a little bit more because I've got a little bit of space in the middle there. Some more. I want a nice even coat. If you tilt your head to the side, you should be able to see whether or not you've got a good coat. Okay, and then pop that in the UV lamp for half an hour, and then we'll be ready to drill our holes and start creating our earrings. Alright, and so they're all finished, and here is what the backs look like. Nice, smooth and shiny, and that's what you want. Okay, now another option is you can put some resin along the edges. However, I prefer not to do that just simply because it can create some complications in the design where you have drips and things like that. So I tend to just leave the edges as they are. You could have a little bit of Renaissance wax on them to brighten them up as well if you wanted, but in general I prefer to leave them as they are. So now we are going to start drilling them. So let's start with this one here. All you're going to do is you're going to take a pin drill and just find your center. And this must be after these have been cured completely. Find your center, press down pretty hard, and just start drilling so that you've got a hole marked out. And then just be careful not to drill too fast through the resin, because it can coax the resin to lift up. And then drill through to the other side until you get a little mark like that, and then go through the other side so that your resin doesn't lift up, because the resin will prefer to lift up rather than get drilled through. So you want to drill through the opposite side, like so. And just go slow when you're doing it. Okay, just so you have a nice clean hole, like so. Then repeat with the other ones. Okay, so now when you're done drilling all of them, I want you to take a jump ring, a nice large one that will fit through the hole easily, and two smaller jump rings Actually, that wasn't right. Got the wrong one there. There we go. String them on. And then take that join and just make sure to slip it inside the seam, like so. Then I've got an ear wire, and I'm just going to open up that end. Pop those 2 jump rings on. Close it up. And that's your earring. Easy as anything. Then before you sell it, I would recommend just taking a piece of tissue or just some paper or something light, just to smooth away any oils left over from your fingers, because if you have a look at this now, you can see it's nice, smooth, shiny, no fingerprints. But I press there, you should be able to see there that there is a fingerprint. Can you see there? Not sure if it can pick up, but you do want to give them a quick clean because the resin does pick up the oils from your skin. Alright, and so let me just quickly wipe away everything here and I will show you what they look like. I'm really happy with how they look. And you can see that the translucent liquid clay, you can't actually see there it was translucent liquid clay because the resin has just really cleared it up, so it almost looks like this really interesting stamped inked image in the back almost. Something along those lines, which is really interesting for some of them, such as these ones, where it's kind of floating along on different planes because of the fact that I let it ripple. So it creates a really interesting effect and you'd never be able to guess that it was liquid clay. So I do hope that this tutorial was helpful to you and that you enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments below if you would like to see more tutorials similar to this one, where I kind of use resin as a main element in the project. Because I really enjoyed playing around with it and it's quite different from what I usually make. So let me know and I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.